Well, hello there, my friends. Welcome back to the channel. Today is Friday the 13th, the first of the new year, and I hope everyone's doing well out there. I wanted to talk today about socialism, specifically the idea that socialism is somehow a solution to the predicament we have with capitalism. So I hope you would hear me out before you at least draw a conclusion based on what you think I'm saying, because I actually have very many mixed feelings about this topic. But first, what triggered it? This morning I was reading through scrolling through my feed on YouTube, which isn't very large, but I do subscribe to, a few channels here and there, and sometimes I'll see something that catches my eye, but usually it's the same old stuff these days. Clickbait titles and articles, somebody going with some picture of a monster. It's, whatever you're subscribed to. Or if you subscribe to news channels, it's probably just rage bait headlines, which I don't subscribe to any news. I just can't deal with it. I'll seek it out or hear about it if I need to. Anyway, on the side, I do subscribe to a few channels that talk about, for example, maybe right-wing topics or left-wing topics or socialism or capitalism, communism, whatever it might be, because I'm interested in what people have to say. There's one specific channel that is very socialist-oriented, and I find myself rolling my eyes so often at the things I hear. But of course, I'm a person who believes in social programs. We're all basically socialist in the U.S., for example. We don't realize that you can title it however you want, but we are a capitalist nation, but we definitely have social programs. And a lot of people are like, well, we shouldn't have any social programs. Well, then you wouldn't have school. You wouldn't have fire and rescue. Who is going to pave the roads? And especially even a military to protect you. And then people will divert with other fallacies and arguments about, well, the military's too big and they take advantage of all these things. Yes, they do. Capitalism has a huge problem, especially when you talk about crony capitalism, which is what we have, which is welfare for the rich. So while everyone's distracted, blaming the issues that we have on social problems, those social problems are created, of course, by a power-hungry, a group who continue to accrue wealth while many other people suffer. The fact this is happening, the fact that capitalism, the way we operate in the West, is actually not helping the small guy, the average person, I think is used as an excuse to say we need to abandon it and go to social programs. We need to let the government distribute the wealth, which is basically what socialism is. In essence, socialism means you trust the government to distribute all the wealth, all the resources, and determine, who works, who doesn't, and where, basically. I mean, not to the extent of individual jobs, but as much as they control the market. There have been cases in communist countries where the government came in and just took over basically all the businesses, kicked out the owners, people who would run their businesses for generations. Nope, we run the show now. And you know what happened within a short time? There were shortages of certain foods, and pretty soon there was hunger, and people couldn't get the resources they need because the government is not equipped, nor do they have the interest in doing what's best for the customer, because they're only there to keep their power, as they always have been. And so when people talk about socialism being a solution to anything, my question is, who distributes the wealth? Who deals with the taxes? Who fixes the roads? If you can't answer these questions, then you haven't thought it through at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the post that I saw, and the channel, I guess I'm not here to call anyone out, but it was just a post of a screenshot from some girl from Instagram, or I think it was Instagram or Facebook, I couldn't tell, but her profile picture was just her, let's just say her chest region, basically, with the shirt on, of course, but that kind of told me a little bit about it. And this is a guy who, prides himself on being an upstanding, guy who's for the people and whatnot, but then, of course, they're getting ad revenue from the same companies that they despise, that they complain about. It's irony at its best, but the quote was this. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. And it said, you are not grinding You're being exploited for your labor, even though it would be so much, I guess, easier to read this if I didn't have, it wasn't the UR, I understand. But when it's an important topic, this is a channel that tends to be more upstanding. And this is by just some random Facebooker, right? You're not grinding, you're being exploited for your labor. And for some reason that bothered me, because I kind of laughed at myself. I thought back, I said, I used to agree with that actually at one point in time. I would totally relate to that. And I still do, because I realize how many people are abused and exploited throughout the system. But what's ignored here is the fact that there's no context whatsoever. And when I read the comments on that post, they were pretty much all against it, saying, well, the good posts, the one that had something to say, said, well, I started my business from scratch. I worked my butt off. And basically, to me, my post was that I said, hey, grinding doesn't necessarily mean that you're being exploited. We're all being exploited by each other in one way or another, sometime in our life perhaps, but you've got to put your nose to the grindstone and work your ass off to get the things you want. And what that post was implying, and some of the responses in the comments, the positive ones, which were usually one-liners, were along the lines of, yeah, we got to take back our society and we all deserve to be treated fairly. And even the posts and responses I made to people, they would say, so what about the people who can't work and the people who are suffering? I say, we take care of those people. We have social programs for people who need them. And when you're talking about the homeless, I said, my niece died a few years back and she was out on the streets. She didn't want help. She wouldn't take help. And she told us, when my wife went down to walk the streets with her, and she was telling her all about how easy it was to be homeless in Portland, and how there's just so many, basically everything you need for free. And so why be part of society? And when people say these are the minority of homeless or a minority of people who are on welfare, that's true. But there are a lot of people who do take advantage of the system. And so it leads people to become bitter about, some of these services are offered and people don't even take advantage of them. I worked at a soup kitchen when I was on, doing community service for quite a while. And I heard all the stories and talked to the people outside about how, those guys won't come in and get free food. They'll just stand on the corner with a sign and beg instead. They have food available to them. They have shelter available to them. And they don't take it because they don't want to abide by the rules. And they say, you can't do drugs if you're staying in the shelter. Guess what? The rest of us have chosen to get our shit together. And, it's hard to have empathy that extends all the way down the line. So I'm getting a little bit off track here, but this shit's important because we need to face reality. There are a lot of people that need help out there. There are also a lot of people who don't want help. And to continue to give free services to people who aren't making any effort on their own behalf, who are able-bodied, is what drives a lot of animosity towards the left, because the left caters to this. That's why Portland is a cesspool right now. That's why it's turned into a complete garbage city. So back to socialism. Folks like to point out things like Denmark and say, look at the success story there. Their own leaders have come out and said, we are not a socialist nation. We rely heavily on capitalism and trade. And I think that people really misunderstand what it means to be either communist or socialist. And the fact that a few years ago I had maybe a different opinion because I didn't realize there were so many American young people who actually self-identify as communists. I mean, these have got to be the least educated flock of sheep in the world. You want to support communism. Okay, so where did this work again? Where are the success stories of communism? Here's the thing with socialism and communism. As I said before, somebody's always in charge of your shit. Whether it's the food on your table, whatever it might be. If it's a company, at least you can spread the word or sue the company. When it's the government in charge, there's nothing you can do. They just tell you to shut up. It's the way it's always been. Since when have politicians ever really answered to the people? And why would we think it would be any different if we all decided to just let them declare the wage and what we get? You know, it's amazing the disparity and difference throughout the country. So people experience things differently. Minimum wage, I looked before this video, it's $7.25 is the national minimum wage. Now, if you live down in the South in some states, they might pay you as a waitress or a server even less. So you can get paid like $2 an hour. There are some places where they don't even have to pay their servers a wage at all. And women are willing to work for this. And I say servers and waitresses, there are waiters, but it's mostly women in a lot of these industries that just totally get jacked around because that's always been a job that women could do where they could make good tips. But some places won't pay you a wage and they say, oh, you just have to make tips to make a living. It's pretty messed up. And anything you don't make, then they'll pay the difference. Let's just say they don't make enough to make it worth it. $7.25 national average just for other jobs. I live in Washington State, in Vancouver, Washington, and the minimum wage in Washington State is $15.74, which means, put it this way, in my state, the wage is double the national average per hour, plus $1.24 to buy yourself a coffee in the morning, right? Of course, the coffees are $5 up here. And that's the thing that's often ignored. Prices are different. Our liquor tax is like 30% here. It's crazy. You buy a bottle of vodka for $15, it comes out to like $28. It just blows my mind. We have all kinds of higher taxes. Our gas prices are extremely high. We saw like even in Cali down there, it was like $7 a gallon. Still in Alabama, you're probably paying like $4 a gallon at the same time. That's the disparity. That's the difference. You live in an area with higher wage and you pay more to live. Your rent is exorbitant, ridiculous. You can't even rent a house for under a couple grand. So my point here is that since all this shit's going on, people are getting pissed off because they can't do the things that their parents said they would be able to do. Go to college, get a good job, buy a house, right? And the fact is, a lot of these companies are truly selling houses to these multinational corporations who are completely screwing over the average person and making it impossible to buy because, you know, they're basically jacking up the rates to the point where people can't even buy a home anymore. I mean, I got lucky. We bought this house. We're still paying it off. We still owe most of it. We have hardly touched the principal because of interest, but we bought this in 2004. We lived here about 17, 18 years, and we got lucky because we bought it on a stated income right before the housing crash, and we were one of those lucky people that got in. But the fact is that the system is totally designed to put people in perpetual debt. This has been, you know, from the beginning, it seems like people just, the credit cards, it's fascinating. If you look at the history of credit cards, when they started in, I think, the 60s, how, you know, there was a start and then a failure because no one paid it back, and then they finally got it worked out. And now it's just normal for people to go out and buy a bunch of shit they don't need. And that brings me to the part I wanted to talk about. People talk about working 3 jobs and still not being able to afford a living. I had to do the math on the minimum wage. You know, if you're working 80 hours a week, you're working 2 full-time jobs, you're bringing home like $4,500 a month after taxes. And so if you figure you're living in an area where rent's maybe cheaper, say even $1,000 a month, I mean, rent could be a hell of a lot more than that, say $1,500 a month, but you've still got $3,000 left. What are the rest of the bills? And it's funny because there is a huge swath of society, or Americans, I don't know the percentage, that really do work their asses off and can't afford their basic life. And that's unfortunate, and we need to figure out how to fix that. However, I think that most people, often you'll see, you know, a really nice car parked in the driveway of a totally shitty house. And you're wondering, why is a person leasing a car for, you know, spending all this money? I've known people who have done this, who have been totally broke, and their priority is to spend like $450 a month on a car so they can show off their car. Maybe they want to wear designer clothes, and then people get to this attitude of, well, I'm entitled to have nice stuff. Yeah, you are. But if you're working your ass off to live and then you're going out and you're buying shit that you don't need, that's on you. And this happens a lot. And I don't want to get into this because I feel like I'm attacking the welfare system, because I'm not. There are some people who truly need help. And I think that we need to help people with hospice care, help people when they are unemployed and can't work because they got hurt on the job. All these are taken care of. But there's also a different issue. There are some people out there who totally exploit the system, who just live off of welfare and do whatever they want and don't really put in any effort in society to like pay back that debt to all of us as taxpayers. Now that sounds selfish as fuck, but it's the truth. It's the fact that we all who pay taxes in this country, every time you go to the gas pump, some of those taxes are supposed to help pay for the roads, right? But there are some taxes like the sin tax, which you wonder, where does it go? Like liquor taxes, tobacco taxes, all this is just pocketed by lobbyists. And it's fucked up. So people get upset about the system and they say capitalism has destroyed us. They don't realize it's not just the companies. It's the fact that the companies use the government to give them subsidies and tax breaks. Like, for example, Elon Musk. He got billions in tax breaks because of his, for Tesla. Meanwhile, at the same time, he was complaining about other people getting freebies. Farmers do it. People have been talking about the price of meat, eggs, all these different things. People don't realize that almost all meat and dairy are subsidized. The fact you can go in and buy a gallon of milk for like $2 or $3 in a lot of places is crazy when you think about what milk really is. But even mass produced, the government pays farmers not just to sell, for part of their crop, but also to destroy their crops when they have too many crops. And this is all done through corporate lobbying to keep prices high. The market drives itself. So what I'm getting at is, even if socialism was a utopia, how does that work? And a bigger question is being paid what you're worth. For example, we want a doctor who's been to school for years. Now, under any type of a socialist program, a doctor would have to get paid more than, a garbage man even. Like, I make that as a joke because actually garbage men get paid pretty well. But when I was a kid, of course, they had to get out and lift the cans. Now, it's all done by truck. It's pretty easy. But the point being that a lot of folks have this idea that we need to evenly distribute wealth. And if that's part of your socialist, policy, it will never work. There are going to be people who want to get up and grind. And that's why you are not grinding, you're being exploited for your labor. Really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. When I thought about how many times I've tried to start my own business, been let down, kind of let it fall apart, or just didn't work out, working for other people, messing up my back, just working hard in my life to try to do the right thing. And then you hear people who just have this idea that they don't want to work anymore. There are some people who are just sick of shitty jobs. Yes, a lot of people. The whole silent quitting movement, I think it's great. But you're quitting shitty jobs. Meanwhile, you should be getting another job, right? Finding something else that you can do to make money. It should always be about... And I think that, I hate to say it, but the social media and the whole influencer generation has really changed kids' minds, and the fact that they think that these guys make millions of dollars and they just play around and hang out in their mansions. It's ridiculous that I should have to work for this amount an hour. But the fact is, that's the way the world still works. All social media fads will fade. In time, everyone goes back to zero. When I was a kid, if people became millionaires or billionaires, it gradually grew and they accrued wealth. These days, they're made and broken overnight. The internet has brought this like fame and doom complete loop where people are like worth billions. You look at FTX, the most generous billionaire in the world, he's worth, $36 billion. And then overnight he's lost all the money. Oh, he never had it. Oh, he spent it on other shit. Because people are believing in these false premises of money and what it really means. Money, no matter what big companies do, no matter how much corporations feed people, the exchange of labor for actual goods is still an actual functioning part of life. In other words, you can't just get around working. You have to do something. So, and like I said, you still have to pay taxes. We have social programs. We have fire departments. If you have an issue, you can call the police. We have a court system. It's fucked up. We need to fix it. But it's not not realize that is social. Those are social programs is missing the whole point. I feel like a lot of work ethic has been lost, and people don't realize. But at the same time, our ancestors, our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, they worked their asses off to fight for the rights that we have now. For example, things like the 40-hour work week. That wasn't always available to people. You would have extremely long work weeks, so people began to unionize, and then they would fight for a 40-hour work week. And at one time, a lot of the workers at various factories they'd been fighting for rights for a long time. They wanted a minimum wage and a fair work week. And this is the exact same time. I don't recall if it was the late 1800s, but this is the Pinkertons. You probably heard of Pinkerton Security. The Pinkertons were actually basically a mob, a security mob that was hired by the mill where all these men worked that were protesting. They were hired to go in there and basically beat the shit out of these guys. I don't remember how many people died, but it was horrible. Like, they were just kick the shit out of these guys because they didn't want them to organize and actually get rights. Point is that these ancestors fought for the rights we have today, the things that we have today. And the ability for a person to go to work, they fought to be able to work, okay, and work fairly. And now we just complain about it. And it's understandable why people are pissed off when the wage doesn't keep up with the inflation. And what I'm getting at is not that we shouldn't change anything, that capitalism is great. That's not at all what I believe. I think that capitalism has so many flaws, but I also believe, after all the research I've done, that capitalism resonates closer with human nature than any other system. And it always brings me back to the famous quote by Winston Churchill, which I don't like the guy, but he did say one quote. He said, democracy is the worst form of government, except all of the others that have been tried, or something to that effect. And he's right. Democracy sucks. I remember thinking that, well, an election should be chosen by the people, right? And I still believe that's probably the best way, even though it sucks. But then I'd say, well, people would say, well, what if people are misinformed? What if everyone votes because of the propaganda? They believe that everyone else is the enemy and they can't get accurate information. That's been going on for thousands of years. And only today do we have access to what we call the truth, which is the internet, which is 90% bullshit. And you can't just draw your own conclusions based on what you hear on one newscast or one article. You've got to go in, you got to do deep diving to figure out not just whether something's true, but the intentions behind somebody who would want you to believe it's true. It's complicated and confusing, but I gotta say, with all the problems we have, capitalism still at least puts companies somewhat in responsibility because it puts people in power of which products they choose. If you give power to the government to distribute your food, you'll get packages that say meat, stuffing. I don't know if you've ever seen They Live. It's great, where everything's just these simple slogans. You go to the store and everything's just black and white packages with just the name on it and of what it is. A lot of places that's how it is, because corporations don't want to operate in a place where they're stigmatized. It sucks that this is the situation we live in, where I want to say it's not the corporations that are the problem. It's the unfettered growth and the unrestrained access to everything, including people's information, their purchasing habits, the fact that, Twitter was working with the FBI and CIA. Is anyone surprised about that? No, Facebook's been doing it forever. They all do it. That's nothing new to most people who realize that everyone's being watched and everyone's basically treated like a fucking slave. Under socialism, that would be 10 times worse. And I would completely be willing to have a civil discussion about this. Leave a comment if you disagree. I'm not going to attack you. Because I 3 years ago probably would tell you I'm on the other side of the fence. I still believe basically what I've come to the conclusion of is that we already have socialism. It's just a different form. With that, I bid you farewell. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more content, check out my Patreon if you want to support my channel. And 15-Minute Free Thinking is my podcast. Be well and take care of each other. And I'll talk more about this topic in the future. Peace out.